Welcome to Spiritual as Fuck,
Spiritual as Fuck,
a podcast where we explore everything outside of the ordinary. I'm Liz Volpe. I'm a social entrepreneur, now psychic medium, teacher and mentor with a huge passion to inspire people to dream big and change the world.
I'm Diane Driscoll, a coach, facilitator and speaker. I'm also a psychic intuitive, learning to incorporate my spiritual gifts into my life and business.
We're here today to share real and raw spiritual stories. It's going to give you a safe space to challenge what's normal and have some serious fun along the way.
We hope you're ready to get spiritual as fuck. Welcome to episode 2 of the Spiritual as Fuck podcast. We are delighted to be today talking about spiritual awakening. Now, no joke, Liz, when you asked me to join you to be co-host for this podcast, this is the episode I think that in my mind I was most excited about. So even though I didn't have any clue what we were going to be talking about, I just knew that when I went through my spiritual awakening, I just wanted to hear stories from other people. I wanted to know what were their experiences, what were they going through. I was Googling lots of different things and just trying to hear, am I going crazy? Am I losing my mind? What is this spiritual awakening thing that I am going through? And today, that's what we're going to unpack. That's what we're going to spend some time talking about our experiences, what we both went through, knowing that there's no right, there's no wrong way. Literally share the good, the bad, and the ugly of spiritual awakening. So first, let me start with, how was your experience of spiritual awakening? And do you even call it spiritual awakening? Because it's not the only term that's out there.
I have to admit, before the spiritual awakening, if anyone used to say, I've had a spiritual awakening, I'd look at them a lot. Oh, okay.
I hear you.
All right. A spiritual awakening, hey? Don't know. So you're probably thinking this about me right now. Because yes, I had a spiritual awakening. I've had more than one looking back. But I'm going to start with the story on the big one, the recent one, which happened to me less than 2 years ago. So I was just going along life, minding my own business. It was the middle of COVID, and one day I was just incredibly drawn to try automatic writing. Have you ever heard of it?
Yeah.
So for anybody that doesn't know, it's just a process where you sit down, follow certain kind of steps, and the whole goal is to be able to get into a deep kind of theta state where you can open to be able to channel and to write. And this pull towards trying this was incredible. Like, I had no choice, put it that way. And I quickly read a book on how to do it. And I sat down and I started to learn how to automatic write. And this was the doorway to the spiritual awakening. And now it really makes sense. I was obviously being pulled to try this. This was my way to open the door or lift the veil, as they say, to the other side. Because 4 days into actually doing automatic writing, I suddenly, literally went into a tornado. It's the only way I can describe it. It was like a tornado, a hurricane, and every other weather event happening inside me all at the same time. Was it enjoyable? No. My goodness. Look, I won't go into everything because I'm sure there's many more episodes to share, but what happened over the space of about 3 weeks was that I think my third eye opened as I stepped into this spiritual awakening. And the way that this happened for me was that I was suddenly able to connect with people in spirit. So I went from living, my life with a normal vibration, my feet very much on the ground, being a mom, running my business, to suddenly being in bed at night, not able to sleep, not able to think, not able to eat, literally having connections with spirit for about 3 weeks straight.
So actually hearing people, hearing voices, seeing people, what was that? What was that initial experience?
So the initial experience was through automatic writing. So as I was sat writing these very quick thoughts that were popping into my head, I actually felt my third eye open and I actually saw the spirit of a man in my mind's eye right. And at the same time of all that, it was almost like every psychic sense open. I got the clairvoyance, suddenly seeing. I felt, I got claircognizance. I just knew exactly, I knew this person was related. Yeah. I heard drop in by clairaudience a name. So from that moment, it was like, all awakened. And this was incredibly scary.
I relate to the scariness. I relate to the fact that it just completely blows your whole life out of the water. But my experience, I think, was so completely different. In that I remember the exact date. So it was June 2021 and it's 27th of June. And I, like, context in my life at that point in time. So I had so my spiritual journey and my mental health journey are very, very tightly woven together. And I had been through a mental health breakdown, like total wheels fell off in 2016, but had been coming out and recovering really well. But in 2021, and particularly around this time, I could feel myself heading for another burnout and breakdown. Like I could and so that intuitive sense that we spoke about on the first episode, the only times that it hasn't served me to follow my intuition is when I completely ignored it. So I was ignoring it, and it was telling me things like that, and it's hard for me to talk about, but it was like, okay, your marriage is no longer working. The work that you're doing, there's so many things that you need to change about your life that I knew on a deep, deep, deep level, this sense of, knowing and inner knowing. And because I was ignoring what I knew in my body, in my mind, my soul to be true, that it was like, okay, you're not listening, you're not paying attention to this, so we're going to give you a rude awakening. I say we as in the universe, the spirit, whatever is out there. And literally 27th of June, 2021, I had a massive visceral experience, and I'm very body focused, that I literally, my whole inside started changing. My heart felt like it was going to explode. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I had like electricity flowing through my body like I could not explain. I knew it wasn't something I need to rush off to the doctors about. This I knew was energetic. I knew it was spiritual. I knew that there was something happening. And for me, it was, I just remember things like, oh my God, what is this? I can't explain it, but it's something really big. I can't tell anybody about it because I can't even put it into words. But it was frankly, and this went on for months. And now I can't believe I'm actually going to say this because, oh God. Okay, but this is the Spiritual as Fuck podcast, and we said we were going to be real. And okay. But to the point where I was almost feeling in an orgasmic state.
Wow, well, that's the good side of the spiritual lifetime, everybody.
But I had no, that's the only thing I can equate it to. It was like being in that heightened electrical state over a prolonged period of time. And I'm thinking, I can't even function. I can't even talk to people. How can I maintain a business? And, I'm not saying that that's what it was the whole time, but it was like that energetic level is what it felt like. So I was stopping functioning. And yet the voice in my head, the audio, that, the clairaudience that I was hearing at this point in time, everything I was feeling was, you need to change how you're living your life. You are not honoring the path that you're supposed to be taking. And for me, that was where it started out. So I know I started Googling lots of terms around that time. So I think the first thing that I remember putting in, because I journaled quite a bit around this time, was metaphysical. So that was the first thing. It was metaphysical. Okay, there's something that's happening to me. It's not medical, it's metaphysical. And it was like dark night of the soul was another thing that I was looking up. Kundalini, I was looking at chakras, I was looking at energy centers, and I'm thinking, I haven't looked at any of this stuff since I was late teens, early 20s. All of this spiritual and energetic related stuff was coming back to me. So what about for you? How did you cope, Liz, in terms of you're going through this experience yourself, but you need answers? Like, did you Google random terms like I did? Tell me about
Oh my goodness, and I was in a desperate state. I like how you describe it in such a positive way. It's way. Because mine was like, I drank 50 Red Bulls every day. I was so wired. So I was unable to function in that way. But yeah, I mean, in that state of desperation, I think it was something along the lines of, help, I'm hearing voices. I don't know. Help, I'm seeing spirits. I think I sat in front of Google. Google was my best friend for those 3 weeks. And my husband, who was just like the most unbelievable pillar of strength, and making sure that, he was constantly saying, you're not going crazy. You're okay, I'm here. Don't worry. But it was an interesting time. And I think when you go through it, you do feel so desperate. You need to have a community, somewhere to go to, because it's like nothing else, you know. And yes, it's scary, and it does make you question absolutely everything. So Diane, yeah, I mean, I very much would have Googled the exact same things as you. But you know what? Thank God for Google as well.
Yeah.
I know for me, when this started to happen, the first, I guess, intuitive feeling I had was I have to find someone to help me.
Yes.
And I literally started to look in my local area who could help. Psychic mentors, medium mentors. And again, the universe always provides. I all of a sudden literally got led on a path to the most perfect tutor. These incredible signs where I went to bed crying one night to my husband, like, I just don't know what I'm going to do. And I woke up, picked up my phone the next morning and, opened Facebook as you do. And right in front of me was a lady's face saying that she was running a workshop on psychic ability in the local area. But the weird thing was that when I clicked on it, it was from 2006, something years ago.
Timeless.
Yeah. How on earth is this showing on my Facebook feed?
Yeah.
So I actually Googled this lady and found her, and she was the person that actually helped me get everything under control. And that was the point where I could actually just breathe and relax and get used to what was happening to me from that point.
So good to be able to reach out for the help. Like, I guess, number one, your husband being so supportive, like, God bless you, Jesse. and then knowing that you needed help. Like, I think for me, if I had been hearing voices or experiencing what you were experiencing, I would have known I needed help. I think for me, because again, like, I had suffered with anxiety, depression, panic attacks since I was a teenager. So my mental health, I went into this whole state of, I'm losing my mind. I'm about to have another burnout. I'm about to have another breakdown. I cannot let this happen, because I had done such great work, improving myself over the years. And my business was now based on this. Like, I was coaching, mentoring, talking about mental health. And now all of a sudden it was like, I'm losing my mind. I am and I didn't know where to look for help, because, okay, if you go and talk to your psychiatrist about on these things, it's like, for me,
it might not be a good outcome.
Absolutely. And like, I mean, I was on, antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication as well. So I'm like, oh, do I need to up my dose? What do I need to do here? But there was such that inner knowing, that ringing calling that, no, this is actually the complete opposite. This is not you falling apart. This is actually you becoming whole. This is the way you're supposed to be living your life. And I then, the guidance that I was kind of following when, the last episode we were talking about, how do we follow our intuition? I just started saying, okay, I've done the mental health path. I've taken the medication. I've been to the therapist, and please believe me that I stand by all of that. It was so helpful for me. But I needed something different. I needed to trust my intuition. I needed to find a more spiritual way of being. And that for me was, I ended up getting to a point where I started looking for mentors as well. When I realized, okay, this is spiritual. This is a spiritual awakening. What am I going to do about it? Looking for people. So instead of going to a therapist, so I ended up in the last year, I'm off medication. Wow. I now have two spiritual mentors, coaches that I work with, plus surrounded by people like you, Liz. But for me, it's like, oh, wow, that is the complete opposite. So I wasn't falling apart. I was coming together.
How amazing. That is so inspiring.
Oh, it's just, it blows my mind as I still think about it. But I know that, so Joe Williams, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He's a former rugby player, but I follow him on Instagram, and he had this piece of Indigenous wisdom up and I cannot remember the exact quote. I will put it in the show notes, but it was basically around the time of my awakening that had, it's not your mind that's sick, it's your spirit. And when I read this, I cried like a baby. I mean, like sobbing, thinking, oh my God, this is exactly what it is. It's not my mind. And I kept giving myself such a hard time thinking, oh, it's your mind's not working, your brain's not working, you need this medication, you need this, you need that. It's like, no, that's not true. It's like, I just need to reconnect with spirit, reconnect to things that are greater than myself. And I haven't looked back a day since I started doing that. That was the gift of spiritual awakening. For all the good, the bad, and the ugly that I went through, that is the gift that you just realize, yeah, I feel more myself now than I ever have previously.
Wow. I often think that one of the reasons you go through such a hard time is be able to remember who you are, to come home, as I call it.
Yeah, I know. And that term, to come home to yourself, I would have read that in the early stages. Like, what do you mean come home to yourself?
What is that about?
But what does it mean to you? Like, when you now look back, what does the term coming home to yourself mean to you? Because if people are listening to this and they're, the difference, or what we hope the difference with this podcast will be, that we're not going to, trot out the same spiritual terms that everybody does. Now they resonate for us, but why do they resonate? So what does it mean to come home to yourself?
I think it's honestly down to that feeling of complete inner peace for me. It's about actually not being concerned or worried about actually what's happening. I think, all of us go through life with way too many worries. We live in our heads. And what coming home and the sudden understanding of actually there's a lot more to all of this than I first thought. It's just magical. It's amazing. It's like, wow, well, you know what? I can trust that I'm going to end up in the right place. And I don't need to know how. I don't need to know the steps, but I know eventually I'm going to be going to this place. And for me, suddenly being able to connect with spirits, with people's loved ones. Now that in itself is so mind-blowing that it makes you look at everything, We shouldn't be scared of death. We can still communicate with loved ones. The peace that you feel around that is actually incredible. And, that's after all the really tough stuff I went through, that the peace that brings is amazing. So what does it mean to you?
Yeah, as you're saying, because I didn't have an answer for this question. It's not something that I had really spent time thinking about, but it is that sense of being connected to something that's so much greater than myself. Like that's for me, the peace that comes with that, and the almost like being unapologetically who I am. I'm still figuring it out. Like there's a lot of conditioning that this is the way you've been brought up. This is what the society expects of you. Like, I'm a very corporate person. I'm, that's just the world that I grew up in. But it's like, how do you shed layers? It's like getting rid of all these things that are just expected of you, or that you put expectations, the shoulds, the musts, the have tos on yourself. And then it's just you come to a place where I'm just going to be myself, and I'm just going to follow my intuition, and I'm just going to go with the flow and see where that leads me. And it has 100% been the thing that has changed my mode of operation. Like, how I show up every day is so different now than a year ago. Like, the control freak that I would have been back then, where everything had to be planned and meticulously done, and, total workaholic and throwing myself into things. And now it's like, just chill. She'll be right, mate. I'm not even going to try the Aussie accent, but like, yeah, she'll be right, mate. Like, you just go with it. Absolutely go with it. It's, so you mentioned there before, and I think we both feel this, that there is a major awakening, and that's what we've just spoken about. Like, for me, that was, June 2021. For you, I think it was the year prior. But you realize when you've been through that there were other awakenings before that. So what was a previous experience of awakening like for you?
Yeah, so I actually had a completely different spiritual awakening in my early 20s.
Okay.
And at this point, I'd come to Australia as a traveler, living the dream, having the fun. And, I'd always been interested in this type of realm, similar to UFOs. Obviously, I'd had this sense of ghosts, these, random things constantly happening to me. But one particular day, I was just walking through a shopping centre in Brisbane, and I literally stopped in my tracks, like subconsciously. And this didn't come from a conscious decision to stop. And I stopped outside of a bookshop. And the minute I looked to the bookshop, I knew I had to walk in. And I literally walked in there, walked straight to a shelf, and right in front of me was a deck of angel oracle cards. Never seen them before. Never in a million years. But I just knew they were mine. I picked them up. I was, wow, what on earth are these? And literally for days and weeks afterwards, these angel cards became my best friends. And I was so passionate about them because obviously starting to learn how to connect with oracle cards, and not just oracle cards, actually be introduced to angels for the first time in my life.
Okay.
And angel energy, which if you think of what angel energy might feel like, it's the most high vibration, beautiful sense of love, peace, nothing negative attached here. So if you look at the difference between my experiences before that, which were quite negatively framed in my head, sensing spirits that I was scared of, through to actually now this invitation into the spiritual realm with such a positive, beautiful feeling. And I think that was actually the first proper spiritual awakening I went through, and that was the invitation into there is something else. And then the amount of validation that came from reading cards for people, and then without realizing, going from, reading the notes in the oracle book to then intuitively receiving messages.
Yeah, the difference.
And then actually remembering now that I used to actually channel angels and guides for people all of the time in my early 20s. I actually got the name by my brother and our friends that we lived with as Mystic Liz. Because they were like, oh, you're reading your cards again. Everyone that came to our apartment door, they're like, can I read your cards? I'd push it on everybody because I was so into it. I would speak to the angels every day, all day. And the things that used to happen from that were incredible. I've got a million stories.
So what I want to know is, so that was a point in time. So there's awakening then, and then another reawakening. So was it that you disconnected from all of that? Because it seems like you were just remembering some of this stuff now that it's
completely disconnecting from it. And I know why. I stepped into being completely grounded I switched it off. Obviously, you consciously switch this off. So going through life, I started my first business. I was super busy, super successful, grew it very, very fast. And honestly, and I'm not proud of this, I became very ego-driven. I wanted to earn a lot of money. I wanted a material life. I was in my late 20s. That to me at that point in my life was really important. And I worked really hard and I hit those goals. But what happened eventually when I realized that actually money, those nice things were not the answer, suddenly it hit me again. And I had to go back to and opening that door again to spirituality.
Yeah. That it fascinates me, just that block period, because I'm imagining some of our listeners will feel this as well, because your story about the shop and the angel cards, I had a similar experience about 16, walking past a crystal shop in Galway, and I got a jolt that I had to go in, and I bought my first deck of tarot cards. Oh, wow. Now, I never, I shouldn't say I never, like in college I did a few readings for people, but it never felt right to me that it was for other people. So me, tarot cards have always been my connection to both my inner voice, or a different perspective is how I used to look at it. That, okay, if I'm not thinking clearly, then I'll go to the cards for guidance. Not that I would always follow exactly what I was hearing, seeing, feeling, sensing, but this is a different perspective for me to consider. So it's almost like having a conversation with someone else. That someone else happened to be a deck of tarot cards. It's like, it sounds bizarre, but I went through then that I was constantly doing this up until my early 20s. And then it was the moving to Australia, the corporate career, the then getting married, having kids, all the trappings of what I wouldn't have termed this before a year and a half ago, but the 3D life as opposed to the 5D. Exactly. But the physical existence. And then they started to creep back in. So when I was looking for answers on my spiritual awakening, I went back to the cards. That was the first thing that I did. And I still had that deck I still have it from being 16, but I bought a new deck as well, which I now consider my spiritual awakening deck. And it's my little baby that went through the tough times of awakening with me. But it is yeah, it fascinates me that there's this a void period for both of us that we.
I think it's funny because it was a void in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I can still say that intuitively I was operating at a very high level.
Yes,
So
same.
I was very much using all of my psychic senses to build that business and be very successful. But I'd probably switched off the awareness. I wasn't noticing the magic
Yes.
in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, during that time period, I'd switch it off and on. You know, I'd still have these connections to it. And I think that a lot of us will switch this off at numerous times in our lives. We do switch it off when we're going through a hard time. Because when you're sometimes going through a hard time, not only do you self-sabotage and make everything harder because you're operating from that thinking, rational mind, but sometimes you don't want to hear the answer.
Yeah.
The last thing that you want to hear is to go and do the step that's the scariest.
Yes. The thing you should do.
Absolutely. So, you know, I really feel like living an ongoing spiritual life consistently is very hard. I don't know if I'm even going to do it. Who knows if in a few months' time I'm completely switched off again and I forgot that any of this has happened. Yeah. And I come back to it in my 50s.
Yeah. It's true. It absolutely is true. I think for me, that's, you know, what was happening in my teenager early 20s. And yes, totally resonate with the fact that, you know, your intuitive ability was with you and it helped you build your company. There's no doubt about it. Looking back now, I can see absolutely clairsentience, claircognizance through everything that I did all during that time. But it wasn't. So what I think was one of my first awakenings was really in 2016 when I had my total mental health breakdown. And it was, you know, you're ignoring what your body, mind, and soul is. Well, like, no, I'm listening too much to my mind and I'm not listening to my body and soul, going through breakdown. But I went on what's called the Hoffman process. So it ended up being 7 days that I was away in Byron Bay. And it was so funny because to me, like, this is terrible, but Byron Bay was like full of hippie spiritualists kind of thing. Now it's like you go to Byron and the energy in Byron is just phenomenal. But when I went through that Hoffman process, there was so much silent meditation. There was it was a real balance of the psychological work. So like, I mean, you know, trained therapists they're going through this, but it was therapy on steroids with a huge spiritual undertone. So for me, that connecting to myself, that coming home to myself, when you mentioned the term, that was where it started out. And I started my meditation practice, my journaling practice, breath work. A lot of those things came out of that. And that was like, okay, this is what the essence of me feels like. How do I keep getting back to that and back to that and back to that? And I think that's why when I went through my major awakening, then I was at a tipping point where you can choose to either go through breakdown again and, you know, the universe is going to throw this at you in the hardest way possible, or you can remember what the essence of you felt like when you felt it previously, and you can actually follow the path to that again. Like, it's so hard to explain, but I hope that whoever is out there listening to this, that they can resonate with some of the things that we're talking about here, because it will be different for every person who experiences, but I think that there's a thread of commonality through both of our experiences. And I'm just looking forward to our upcoming guests, that we're going to be able to ask the same question of, because we do want to know from them, what are their experiences? How did they go through all of this as well? But what would you, for people who are going through awakening right now, what do you wish you had known at that point in time? Like when you were going through that, like think back to that really raw early stage where you felt your world was falling apart. What do you wish you'd known back then? Or a piece of advice maybe that you think for someone who's going through that raw early stage?
Good question, because through all of it, you know, I still had that inner knowing that it was going to be okay, firstly. But honestly, I really feel like it was around there are like-minded people that have been through this out there that you can go and speak to. You do not need to go through it on your own. And looking back, I feel like you can sense a spiritual awakening coming on in a funny kind of way sometimes. You know, I know there's people around me right now that have started to have little things happen, you know, and so I feel like there are signposts when you're heading for one. I wish I probably would have known that as well. I would have maybe preempted it with myself and eventually expected it to happen. But at the end of the day, just ride it, because what's going to come out the other side is a new you.
Yeah.
Never look at life the same ever again.
Yeah.
It will be tough at first. You're going to feel like you are going crazy, that you can't go and speak to your friends about it, that you feel like you're not authentic. But eventually, you can step out and be who you actually are.
I feel that as well. That sense of almost like I have no idea who I am. I have no idea how I am operating. Like the best way to put it is, well, I said the best way, but the best way to describe it is my whole life fell apart. Like I had no choice but just, and the more you resist, and for me, resistance meant I'm going to have a burnout and breakdown, and I'm going to have to claw my way back into, reasonable mental health again. Or I can do that, great word, surrender. I can trust. I can just, and that inner sense of knowing, to trust that inner sense of knowing that this is happening for a reason. There is going to be something good that comes out the other side of it. And finding some of those practices, like for me, the breath work that I was doing, the meditation that I was doing, the journaling that I was doing, grounding in nature as well. So for me, my lifeline was literally every morning I would get up and I'd walk on the beach and, watch the sunrise. So before my family would wake up, that was what got me through it. So finding a ritual or a practice or something that keeps you grounded, that keeps you centered on yourself, I think that will help you through the process. And just, looking back now, I didn't know this at the time, but the visual that is coming to me is like sitting with your heart open. And it is literally just be open to whatever is coming to you, allow it in, and know that this is coming from a good place. It feels like shit. It feels bad at the time. But if you are open to it and just don't resist it, let it flow through you, you'll get through it quicker. And what's out the other side of it is incredible. Like it's even fascinating for me. And again, this is my scientific brain to observe it and just think, wow, I get to live this life. We get to do this podcast. We get to have these conversations. This just blows my mind. And there is no one spiritual awakening, because
that's right. They're not all going to be as hard as these. My first one with the angels was the most beautiful experience. And I urge you, that's why this podcast exists, that if you are going through a spiritual awakening, definitely reach out to us. Jump onto the website, come in through Instagram, share your story with us. We are definitely happy to talk anytime.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And send us your messages on Instagram if there is a story that you want to share. But we do encourage you to, we like to give a little bit of homework or a little bit of reflection. But if you feel you're going through a spiritual awakening right now, look for some of the signs that tell you, oh, have I experienced anything like this previously? Have I heard anyone else? Google a few of the terms, listen to the podcasts, but just think to yourself, this is happening for a reason, and embrace it rather than resisting it. But yeah, follow us on our Instagram page, and we will be sharing more and more. And even as our guests come on board with the podcast as well, we'll be sharing more of their experiences too.
I can't wait.
Exactly. So that is it for this episode. Next up, we will be introducing our first guest. We are totally freaking out with excitement as the incredible David the Medium joins us. David shares his own spiritual as fuck journey, challenges us that no questions are out of bounds, and blows our minds with personal readings and global predictions. This is an episode not to be missed. So if you're not already one of David's 50,000 followers on Instagram, why not check him out at David the Medium or on his website, davidthemedium.com. Thanks, everyone. That's it for another episode.
Thank you for listening. Did you know that we are building a movement of 1 million people who are spiritual as fuck? We would love for you to join us. You can start by leaving us a review on Apple Podcast. Every month, I'm going to intuitively choose one person and do a psychic reading for you. So
follow us on Instagram, send in your stories and topic suggestions, and join the movement
at spiritual.a.f. Until next time.